Should I tell you a number too? What the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, wait, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At least 5 muscles that create up the posterior axillary border are.
See, that's when it got
I thought
tricky
it was 6,
because
but I know there's 5.
I named one, Miss Suriel named another.
Yeah.
That's when Miss Bauer came in. Miss Bauer wasn't correcting us. She was adding.
Yeah. So Mr. Singletary, tell me what you think they are.
Initially, when she was Miss Suriel was grabbing, I said, "Oh, isn't that the serratus anterior because of where it was at?" And she said, "No, it's something else." And I said, "Well, no."
Serratus anterior doesn't create the axillary border because it wraps around your ribs. So
right. That's how I was
what
thinking.
kind of goes either from your rib cage to your arm or your scapula to your arm, to your humerus?
Okay, then it went to the teres, the major and the minor. I said,
teres major and minor is correct.
Then it went to and I said, I'm thinking about this of scapularis. I said, yeah, that's a possible. Yeah, okay.
You could argue subscapularis, absolutely, even though it comes out in front. Sure, I love that. That's great.
Right.
So anytime you say teres minor, anytime I say teres minor, you say what?
Infraspinatus.
Good.
Because at first I thought supraspinatus. I said, no, that's too superior, and there's something further inferior, and that's why I said it's got to be the infraspinatus. That's when Miss Bauer came and she.
So, sir, do you have any more?
So we got the. Let's see. So the subcellularis. I kind of thought latissimus dorsi, but I don't think that went up high. Well, it goes up high, but I don't think it came across to where.
The latissimus dorsi would be my number one answer. It is the largest muscle in your back. Haven't you ever seen somebody flare out their back and it looks like my shirt right now? The latissimus dorsi goes from where?
That's all the way on the
Its origin is
but don't they doesn't it attach underneath your armpit to the serratus anterior? Well,
Mr. Singletary, you're scaring me. Mr. Singletary, the latissimus dorsi goes from your thoracolumbar aponeurosis up actually to your T12 T6 through T12 vertebrae. It goes over. It actually kisses and attaches to the inferior angle of your scapula, and then it leaps over, wraps around underneath my arm, and inserts into the intertrabecular groove, the groove between the greater and lesser tubercles here. So it wraps up here. But if you grabbed my rear armpit, my rear axillary border, you'd mostly be grabbing latissimus dorsi. Okay, so those are really good. You got the hard ones. And then latissimus dorsi, anything else?
Well, if you really want to push it,
I don't really want to push it.
Where you're grabbing, the core. I thought about it. I said, well,
don't say the coracoid. Don't say the coracobrachialis because it's in front. We're sticking with in back.
You just want the posterior side.
Posterior axillary border.
I was thinking of all of them. What else?
What else is back there?
Teres major, teres minor, infraspinatus,
subscapularis, latissimus dorsi.
Latissimus dorsi, yeah, I said that. I think what else is back there? The deltoids?
Which fibers?
Is that what you were gesturing at?
Which fibers?
Of the deltoid?
Yeah, because you got anterior, middle, and posterior fibers. Which fibers?
Oh, that's not the posterior.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Singletary. That's awesome. Anything else, sir?
I think that's about all.
Cool. You did really good. You did really, really good. There is one other muscle that crosses over the posterior axillary border. Does anybody know it? This is a tricky one. Anybody? Mr. Bose?
Sorry, Mr. Thompson, but I think Miss Rader knows the answer. My hand was up for a different reason.
Oh, okay. I didn't see Miss Rader's hand up too, so Miss Rader, please, do you know the muscle that crosses over?
No, but I'm going to take a guess that it's the trapezius upper fibers.
Yes. Well, it's the long head of the trapezius. The trapezius upper fibers? No, they do not, actually, because the trapezius goes from kind of the head and spine over to the scapula, but it doesn't get over to the arm. Sorry, I thought you were about to say something else, and I actually literally inserted it in my brain. Miss Carrillo?
Was it the middle fibers then?
No, it's none of the trapezius. Trapezius goes from your spine over to your scapula, so it never gets to the humerus. It moves the scapula, so it can't make...
Question?
What is another muscle that makes up the posterior axillary border? And if you think about it, my posterior axillary border is the back of my armpit. Your armpit only exists, everybody, because it has two walls. There is no pit. There's two walls that creates a pit, right? So this back side of my axillary border, this posterior axillary border, is created by muscle going from my body over to my arm. And so we're naming stuff that kind of goes over. And by the way, the reason this is so important is not only is it an important area to rub, but if somebody was having shoulder problems, glenohumeral problems, these would be muscles that could possibly be tight just on the backside, right? So anyway, does that help you with your answer, Ms. Carrillo?
Kind of. Let me just think about the areas that touch there. So we already said the latissimus dorsi. We said infraspinatus teres minor. I know the supraspinatus goes there.
But it doesn't create the posterior axillary border. It's over the top. I need stuff back here. Back here. Hold that thought. I want to call on somebody else. Ms. Abelos.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Wrong button. I want to say pec minor or pec major.
Those would help to create the anterior axillary border. Yeah.
Got it.
We'll come back to that in a second. Hold that thought, because I will be asking what creates the anterior border. Ms. Suriel, you have your hand raised?
Yes, Mr. Sarsgaard. It's just a question. A long time ago, you told us that sometimes we rub the area, like if a client comes or somebody comes and they said, "Oh, I have pain here," we tend to just massage that area. But I believe you told us that sometimes what is pulling is something far away from that area.
Sure.
So my intention of that is because I tend to curve my back a lot, and I believe that muscle sometimes pulls our back to like hunch.
Sure.
to do that position.
Sure.
So yeah, as you are mentioning, there is now more reasons to do that.
Yes.
But to me, the main reason is that pulling because of what I feel.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you're right. That's why we're particularly interested in muscles that cross over a particular joint because it allows us to kind of look at those joint problems, right? And you're absolutely right, Mr. Ariel, the problem could be much further down the line. Mr. Jones, do you have an answer?
Probably not. But I think so. Could the tricep affect it at all?
Well, what are the origins and insertions of the tricep?
The tricep.
How many heads does the tricep have?
3.
3. All 3 go down into your elbow, into your olecranon process, which is why when they pull, I do what action?
Yeah, so it's just your elbow.
Hold on, Mr. Jones. Don't leave me
Okay.
yet.
I'm not,
So when they pull, I do an extension of my elbow. 2 of the heads are back here. You can't actually see the third head really well, right?
Yeah.
The long head actually crosses over the glenohumeral joint and inserts into the scapula and helps to form the posterior axillary border. I suspect that's what Ms. Rader is just about to say. And it is the long head of the triceps. You're absolutely right, sir. And
Yay.
And Mr. Jones, just to throw in a little weightlifting knowledge that you probably knew, which is probably why you said this, this is why there's a big difference between me doing like cable push downs as opposed to dumbbell overheads. Because believe it or not, when I'm doing cable push downs, that long head of the tricep is not stretched, and it doesn't really work. So you're only working two heads of the tricep. When I put my arms over my head, because it goes across my axillary border, the long head is also in a taut position, so all three of my triceps work. So for that reason, this is the more preferred tricep, like overhead French presses are the more preferred tricep exercise for that reason. Isn't that cool?
Yep.
Can you see all of me at work? Cool. All right. So, I love that. Yeah. Okay. So, Miss Rader, will you help us review? I think we got 7 muscles or something crazy. What muscles create the posterior axillary border?
Okay, so the infraspinatus, teres
I
minor,
love that you put those together.
the deltoid posterior fibers, the triceps, long head.
Yes. Good one. Let's throw it in there. Largest muscle in the upper body.
The latissimus dorsi,
And anytime I say latissimus dorsi, you say,
teres major.
thank you so much, ma'am. And the one that Mr. Singletary actually pointed out that I really didn't think about was the subscapularis. Because it's in front of the scapula and it does go across here, but it goes across behind. So it comes up in front, but it's back there. It creates the posterior border. So that's the 7 I've got. Yeah. Really well done. Thank you. And thank you for knowing infraspinatus and teres minor go together, teres major and latissimus dorsi go together. I appreciate it. Miss Carrillo, what are the 7 muscles that make up the posterior border of the scapula? Of the axillary region?
Let's see. Latissimus dorsi, teres major, infraspinatus, teres minor,
Love the way she-
posterior fibers of the deltoid, the long head of the triceps brachii, the subscapularis.
Yeah, I wouldn't think of that one, but yeah. I love the way she said it. She grouped muscles together in a logical format. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Mr. Richards, what are the 7 muscles that make up the posterior border of the axillary region?
You've got the latissimus dorsi and the teres major, the teres minor, infraspinatus,
Yes.
subscapularis, posterior deltoid, and the triceps long head.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Sorry, I mixed something up in my head. You were 100% correct. Yes. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you. Miss Green, what are the 7 muscles that make up the posterior border of the axillary region? Don't ghost me. Miss Green? Oh, good. Cool. What are the 7 muscles that make up the posterior border of the axillary region?
Infraspinatus, teres minor, supraspinatus,
No, not supraspinatus, because that's up on top.
and subscapularis.
Yes.
Where are we? How many did I say?
3. You're doing good. Largest muscle in the upper body? The big wings behind somebody's back.
Step.
Latissimus dorsi?
Uh-huh.
Cool, okay. Anytime I say latissimus dorsi, you say what?
Infraspinatus.
Anytime I say latissimus dorsi, you say teres major.
Okay.
And then we had subscapularis, and what's the last one that's found on the back of my arm, strangely enough, that goes across?
Triceps long head.
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Miss Green. Good, good, good. Good, good, good. Miss Carrillo, yes, ma'am.
So when you said the axillary region, I think I was confusing it for some reason thinking of the axial skeleton.
Yeah.
And I thought of things that were supposed to be connected to the spine for some reason. So the region is just meaning the thoracic, thoracic region, I guess? I don't know. I was just
the
confused.
axillary region?
Oh, axillary.
Your axillary region
my God.
means your armpit.
I
It means your armpit.
myself.
And
Yeah,
and
I
the
was
point
thinking of
and
something.
I think you already know this, but the point I'm trying to make is kind of like we live in the Valley of the Sun. The reason this is a valley is because there's two mountains. It's not because somebody carved a valley. It's because there's two mountains. The two mountains that make up my armpit are these muscles on both sides. And so we're talking about the muscles there. The armpit is just the lack of muscles in the middle, which is why we don't rub directly into somebody's axillary region. There's no muscle there. But you can rub the heck out of the borders. I mean, really hard. Yeah. Cool, cool,
I
cool.
can't believe I mixed that up. Thank you.
Some people remember
oh
that by
my gosh.
Axe body spray. I don't know why, but like, little Axe, I don't know. Axillary, just trying to help you out. Trying to help you out. Cool. Miss Stevens, what are the 7 muscles that make up the posterior axillary border?
The subscapularis, the infraspinatus teres minor,
Thank you.
latissimus dorsi, teres major, the posterior fibers of the deltoid,
3-headed
and then the long head of the tricep.
So nicely done. Hey, Miss Stevens, since I have you on the line,
Mm.
what muscles do you suppose make up the anterior border of the axillary region?
The anterior fibers of the deltoid.
We'll take that. Sure. Goes across here. Yeah, I love that. Anything else that kind of goes across here?
The pec major and minor.
Yeah, pec major. Believe it or not, pec minor.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Pec minor doesn't go across. You can kind of
Yeah.
argue, but you could argue it's part of that border. I'll take pec minor too because it's up in that area at least. Yeah. Okay. Doesn't really cross, but anyway. And you've done a great job, by the way. And there is a muscle that goes from the coracoid process over to the arm, over to the brachial region. You said this.
Coracobrachialis.
Yes, really is a muscle, everybody. It goes from here to here, and it's going to create part of that border. So we had anterior deltoid, pec major, pec minor, coracoid process, coracobrachialis going over here. And if we wanted to get really, really nitpicky, one of the heads of the bicep goes over here. Yeah?
Yes.
Yes. You're cool, Miss Stevens. Sorry, I was actually kind of just talking to the group at that point. You're great. Take a break. One head, I'm trying to think which head it is. Long head or short head? Short head of the bicep goes over here. Right? Is that right, Miss Rader? Short head? Thank you. I have to check with her if my anatomy's right. Thank you, Miss Rader. Anyway, short head of the biceps goes across here too. So how many muscles was that? That was pectoralis major. I really want to throw pectoralis minor in here because you actually hit it in the axillary thing, but it doesn't go across. But let's throw it in. Pectoralis major, pectoralis minor, anterior deltoid, right? It's up here. Coracobrachialis, short head of the biceps. Wow, between the front and back of the axillary region, you've got 12 really important muscles. And you know what's funny is most massage therapists kind of avoid this area. Probably not in this class, because you guys aren't most massage therapists. But a lot of people really avoid this area because they've been taught it's an endangerment site. But they don't realize the endangerment site is, boom, in the dead center. And if you want to know what the endangerment site is, poke yourself in your armpit. You'll find it really fast. It's very noticeable. Whereas when I poke myself in front or in back, I get deep muscular pain. When I poke myself in here, I'm like, oh, that does not feel right. Like it feels very vulnerable and in not a good way. Cool. I love that. Okay. Miss Clayton. 5 muscles that make up the anterior border of the axillary region?
Teres major, teres minor,
Okay, whoa.
anterior.
Whoa. You did a great
sorry,
job.
Sorry.
But
pec
anterior
major,
border,
pec
yeah.
minor.
Yeah.
Pec major, pec minor. The short head of the biceps, the coracobrachialis, and the anterior fibers of the deltoid.
Way to show off, Miss Clayton. Thank you. Miss Osuna, what are the 5 muscles that make up the anterior border of the axillary region?
It is the short head of the biceps, coracobrachialis, the pectoralis major and minor, and the anterior fibers of the deltoids.
Beautiful. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Mr. Singletary, yes, sir.
Question: does the serratus anterior go up high enough to touch that area, in the axillary area?
No. So here's the thing I want you to think about, by the way. This is actually really helpful. If you can see my arm, I'm going to use some tape to kind of highlight some stuff because I'm wearing a black shirt. If I lift my arm up like this is the anterior border of the axillary region, right? This is the posterior border. Hold on a second.
Okay.
Actually, on my ribs is the serratus anterior. The serratus anterior comes from behind the scapula and inserts into my ribs. If you rub your rib cage up here, you are rubbing your serratus anterior.
Okay.
So it doesn't make a border, it actually wraps around your ribs. And this is why when you're really tight in the shoulders, sometimes people have a hard time taking a breath. Because the serratus anterior and pec minor are arguing with the rhomboids. And because they wrap, and the rhomboids go all the way from your spine and hook into your serratus anterior, which goes all the way down here, and they literally compress your rib cage. And I can't tell you how many clients I've said, do you have a hard time? They're like, my shoulders are so tight. I'm like, are you having a hard time taking a deep breath? They go, oh, I am. They didn't even know. And when you're having a hard time taking a deep breath, it tends to make you more wound up, right? Even if it's unconscious and stuff. So yeah. But anyway, yes, sir. Thank you.
No, I'm from looking at a picture. I didn't know whether it went up high enough to reach that area. That's what I was asking.
Cool. No worries. Thank you. Awesome. Okay. Let's do some general anatomy review. And then we'll take a break and we'll come back and we'll talk about the skull. Yeah. I love the skull. You don't have to bother raising your hand. I'm going to be calling on people. What are the 4 rotator cuff muscles, Miss Hendrickson?
The 4 rotator cuffs, supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, and subscapularis.
Thank you. What is the action of the supraspinatus?
To abduct the glenohumeral joint.
Thank you. What is the action of the subscapularis?
To medially rotate the glenohumeral joint.
Thank you. What is the action of the teres minor?
Laterally rotate.
What is the action of the infraspinatus?
Adduct the glenohumeral joint. Or wait, is that not right?
What is the action of the teres minor? You just told me. Action of the teres minor.
Oh, to laterally rotate.
I say teres minor, you say what?
Infraspinatus.
Why do we do that?
Because they both do the same thing.
Thank you.
Synergy.
Thank you. It was a trick question. I wanted you to say laterally rotate both times. By the way, there is some adduction happening because they cross over the thing and they pull a little bit, but they are rotator cuff muscles, so I was kind of focused on rotator stuff. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
What are the 4 rotator cuff muscles, Mr. Craven?
Infraspinatus, subscapularis, supraspinatus, and teres minor.
Cool. What is the action of the supraspinatus?
To abduct the scapula.
Close. Abduct what?
The glenohumeral joint.
Yes. I'm bending at my ball and socket. It has nothing to do with my scapula. Very cool. What is the action of the subscapularis?
Medially rotate.
Yes, sir. What is the action of the teres minor?
Laterally rotate.
Yes. What is the action of the infraspinatus?
Laterally rotate.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You said it like you didn't know, but you knew every one. That's why I was laughing. What are the 4 rotator cuff muscles, Mr. Godot? Mr. Godot? Paging Mr. Godot? 4 rotator cuff muscles, Mr. Godot? No? Good. What are the 4 rotator cuff muscles, Mr. Manzanares?
The supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, and teres major.
Don't say teres major, sir.
I mean the latissimus dorsi.
No. Teres major and latissimus dorsi go together. Hold on. We did really good. We got an up one. There's one on top, supraspinatus. 2 underneath the things, teres minor and infraspinatus. That was good. And there's one under the scapula. Just like a train that runs under the ground or a boat that runs...
Subscapularis.
Subscapularis. Good. Sir, what is the action of the supraspinatus? Which I'm showing you right now. That action.
So elevate.
Well, this is elevation. I am AB duct of what joint, sir? What's my shoulder joint called?
The axial joint.
Actually, I like that. But it's the glenohumeral joint. It is in the axial region, though. You are absolutely right. We're in the right ballpark, which is good. So, AB duct, the glenohumeral joint. What is the action of the subscapularis?
So medial rotate.
Yeah, which joint? Same joint.
Is it the same one?
Yeah. I just need you to say it, though.
Glenohumeral joint.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Okay, and what is the action of the infraspinatus?
To laterally rotate.
Yeah, what joint?
The glenohumeral joint.
Yes. What is the action of the teres minor?
To laterally rotate.
Yes, thank you, sir. Awesome job. Thank you, thank you. Well done. Cool. What are the deep 6 lateral hip rotators that are found underneath my gluteus maximus? What are the deep 6 lateral hip rotators that are found underneath my gluteus maximus? And then as a follow-up question after I ask you that, I'm going to ask you which one is most superior, which one is most inferior, which one can pinch the piriformis, right? Because those are 4 facts I think you should know. Yes. And I feel like Mr. Ma knows that. Mr. Ma, what are the... He's poor guy. He's like, no! Mr. Ma, can you tell me the name of the deep 6 lateral hip rotators?
So it would be gemellus.
Yeah, gemellus.
Gemellus, inferior, and obturators.
Yep, obturators. Yeah, obturators. You said it right.
Internis.
Internus.
Yeah, gemellus superior.
Yes.
And obturators extremis.
Yes.
Right.
2 more.
Piriformis.
Piriformis. Yeah.
Quadratus femoris.
Mr. Ma, that was fantastic. Actually, quadratus femoris. Yes. Yeah. And you actually said it just fine. You just said it with an accent. Like, it was perfect. It was really good. So, just to review, he said gemellus superior, gemellus inferior, obturator, internus, obturator, externus, piriformis, and quadratus femoris. Sir, which one of those is known to pinch the sciatic nerve? It can actually impinge on or pinch the sciatic nerve that runs through your bottom. One of those.
Is it a quadratus femoris?
No, it's the piriformis.
Oh.
And I remember because pinch starts with a P and piriformis starts with a P. It helps. Yeah.
Oh.
Which one of those is most superior? It's the highest one up in this little pie that's in your bottom. It's the most superior one. And it forms the letter T, by the way.
I'm gonna say gemellus.
You would think gemellus superior, and that is higher than gemellus inferior, but it's also the piriformis. And the piriformis, everybody, forms a T with the edge, the lateral border of your sacrum, as this thing goes to your greater trochanter. So the piriformis. What is the most inferior muscle, sir? And it's a four-sided muscle.
Is that gemellus inferior?
No, it's the quadratus femoris.
Oh,
So you did really good, though. We're off to a good start. We really are. Actually, I'm really serious. So everybody, just so you can think about it, this is about the space that is inside everybody's bottom, underneath their gluteus maximus. This is the piriformis. It's the most superior one. This is the quadratus femoris. It's the most inferior one. The gemellus superior, inferior, obturator internus, obturator externus are all right in here. This piriformis forms the letter T with the edge of your sacrum. So it's very easy to find. If you find the greater trochanter over here in the sacrum, you can find this thing. Anyway, that's why I'm trying to make all these points. You did a great job, Mr. Ma. You're good. You're good. Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll take it. Where was I? Oh, Mr. Overman.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Overman, what are the deep six lateral, you know what I'm going to say, what are the deep six lateral hip rotators?
You got the piriformis, you got gemellus inferior, gemellus superior, obturator internus, obturator externus, and quadratus femoris.
Cool. Which one is most superior?
Piriformis.
Which one is most inferior?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask the pinching question.
Sorry.
Quadratus femoris.
Thank you. The other four are found between there. So we now know we have this kind of piece of pie. Which one is known to pinch the sciatic nerve or impinge on it?
Piriformis.
Yes. I say pinch, everybody, but the real term is impinge, right? To press on it. But it's pinching the nerve. A lot of people use it that way too. That was fantastic. Thank you, thank you, thank you, sir. Mr. Godot? Deep six lateral hip rotators? Take a stab. Going once. Going twice. Gone? Okay. All right. Miss Dimitruk. Hi, Miss Dimitruk.
Hello.
I know that you're... Oh, Mr. Godot. Sorry, Miss Dimitruk. You were saved by the hand. Yeah. Mr. Godot, welcome back, sir.
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Godot. Mr. Godot, what are the deep six lateral hip rotators? That are found underneath your gluteus maximus. The ones we've been talking about.
So there's I have trouble with the first one.
No, that's good. That's good. Obturator.
Obturator. Okay. So obturator internus, piriformis, the obturator externus.
Good.
Quadratus femoris.
Yep.
Gemellus.
Yeah, it's gemellus. I know it looks like gemellus. I agree with you, but it's gemellus.
Gemellus, okay. And then gemellus inferior.
And gemellus superior. Did you already say that one?
Inferior and superior.
Yeah.
If that helps.
Yeah, cool. It does help. Which one of those six is most superior?
I want to say the piriformis.
I want you to say the piriformis, so that's good. Which one of those is known to pinch on the sciatic nerve?
Let's see. Is it the same one?
Which one is that, sir?
The piriformis.
Yes, it is. Which one of those actually forms a T by inserting into the lateral border of the sacrum and the kind of the top of the greater trochanter?
Okay, I'm looking at it right now, and I'm not seeing the T.
Well, we have to use the lateral border of the sacrum to make the top of the T.
Oh, okay. Is it the piriformis again?
Yes, sir, it is. So,
Okay.
and last question, which one of those muscles is the most inferior?
Quadratus femoris.
Good job. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Everybody, let's take a break right there. All right, everybody. Well, we got a minute. So, take a moment.
Mr. Tapscott,
Yes, Miss Ablos.
the subclavius is in the anterior axillary region, but not in the fold.
Oh, okay. Cool. So you're saying we're both right?
No, you're right.
Oh. That is a very admirable quality, ma'am. I would have tried to twist that into at least we're both right or something. I love that. Okay. Wish this skeleton had some contrast. I might lower the light here a little bit. There. Ooh. Spooky skeleton. Yeah. Who knows? All right, everybody. We're back. And today we're going to talk about the tippy top of your body. It's really amazing. We're going to talk about the bones of the skull. Of course, I'm going to tell you what I do every time we talk about bones, which is if you learn your bones really well, it's easier to understand origins and insertions really well. There's several reasons why the skull is so very, very important, and the muscles associated with it and such. Obviously, it houses your brain, which is the head of your nervous system, your central nervous system. Everything that you feel and experience and do has to be processed through this unit. All of it has to come into your spine from and back and get up to your head and get up in here. The vast majority of your brain, not the vast majority, one of the largest sections of your brain is a section that deals just with visual processing, which is a whole other fascinating realm. But you're allowed, you also have your ears housed in this head, which allows you to hear, your sense of smell here, and it's processing all the touch that your body is receiving, temperature and vibration, everything. So your sense of the world gets processed in this puppy right here. The other fascinating thing about this that we touched on yesterday is the way your facial expressions are tends to dictate how you feel. And that doesn't just mean you can smile all your problems away, but it does mean it really helps when you try to. It's working for Miss Savarino right now. She's smiling and she's happy. Yeah, see? That's right. So facial muscles are going to become very, very important. Because this is kind of an emotional, reflective center for us, people tend to carry lots of tension in their face, and we see that. They kind of lock down their jaws sometimes, so they get temporal mandibular joint disorder, all sorts of things like that. We'll see it around their eyes. We read faces, you know, that's what we do. So that's all very important. There's also other structural things that are very fascinating about the head, and that is, you know, we forget that these shoulders back here on this skeleton, they've got little screws screwing your scapula to your rib cage. In real people, and I hope we all know this now, there are no screws screwing your scapula into your rib cage because your scapulas are free floating. This is why you guys in massage class grab them like this and peel them off people's back without any injury to them. So what holds these puppies up? Essentially, the trapezius, the upper fibers of the trapezius, literally hook on the back of your head and go down here. So your shoulders are actually suspended from your head. Most of us think of our head as just kind of stacked on top of our shoulders. That's really inaccurate. Your head is more like a tent pole for stuff to hang off of. So yes, it houses your brain, all this stuff, but it has a structural importance, right? And this is why tension between the head and shoulders gets so intense, because really the shoulders really are pulling on the back of the head. And those same muscles have to help hold the head up too. But these are hanging off the back. So this is a lot. This is a lot. And it's a very, very important area. It's also like the feet in the sense that it's a very articulate area, right? So you might use your forearm on somebody's back. You're probably not going to use it on their head because the areas are too detailed here. Miss Savarino would. We know she would. She's going to try it today just because I said that. Okay. Anyway, but like the feet, it's got lots of little nooks and crannies. And if you've ever had a good facial, and they're not always good, a really good esthetician gets every little spot on your body. They're really detailed. It makes for a really nice face massage. And face massage, and I don't just mean the nice fluffy face massage, but in the jaw here and all this stuff, you could spend a good hour doing that. And that's a useful skill because you will have clients that come to you and want that. But you'll also, it's a useful skill when you flip somebody over at 40 minutes into a massage and then realize it's a 2-hour massage. And I've only done that about 200 times in my life. So probably 2,000 actually. And then you can be like, I'm not an idiot. This is how I do my massage. And you can keep going. At the end, you give them like 30 minutes of head and neck and all this stuff. They think it's amazing, by the way. You're fine. But you need those kind of things to be able to buffer your mistakes. Miss Savarino, talk to me.
I have like a pretty good esthetician, and she uses like that, like those jade roller, like, you know, cause like, can we buy like a facial? Like, oh, you're using the skeleton, you know, that's tight. But can we buy like a facial thing so like we can like keep that strictly for the face? Cause like I don't want people to touch my feet and touch my face. So like if I like just whipped out a tool and like just started going to town on people's faces, like would that be acceptable, or is that like? Yeah,
you're talking about a jade roller, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that would be totally acceptable. I'm fine with that. A jade roller, everybody, is essentially well, it is. It's a piece of jade, smooth, smooth, smooth. It's on a cute little roller, and some people even chill them down. And they're just kind of nice, cool, kind of, it's just a nice little tool. You're not using it to go deep. You're using it to go light, and it's just kind of a nice thing. So, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, very, super safe. I mean, as long as you don't roll over their eyeball or something. Even then, it's probably safe. Okay. So let's talk about the bones. I'm going to share my slide presentation with you and kind of talk to you about some of the really important features, the highlights of the face to know about. Yeah? Yeah. All right. Let's see. Here we go. All right. By the way, this muscle right here is the temporalis. It's not the temporalis? Why are you shaking your head, Ms. Correa? Oh, you can't see. Sorry. This muscle right here is the temporalis. Now I understand. Thank you, by the way, for doing that, Ms. Correa. I need some kind of feedback. Temporalis actually is not your main chewing muscle, but it is one of them. It actually goes into your jaw here. I hope we all know this is the sternocleidomastoid. Yep. This is the orbiculus oculi. And we'll talk about that later. These are facial expression muscles here. They're not structurally important, but they are important. So we'll get to that. Okay. We're actually not going to worry about this too much. By the way, one little point to make, though, even though I just said we're not going to worry about this too much. Your hyoid bone is this tiny floating bone in your neck that we will talk about here in a little bit. But when you see somebody's bump in their neck, it's actually not from the hyoid bone. It's from the thyroid cartilage below. It's the thyroid cartilage below that gives people their Adam's apple. The hyoid bone is the bone that's always crushed in murder mysteries. For those of you that like to, anytime somebody gets strangled, it's always the hyoid bone that gets broken here. I'm just saying what happens, man. Yeah. Miss Hendrickson, yes.
Why is why is it more prominent in men than women?
Excellent question. So guess what? It is not even really that it's bigger, it's a different angle. So can you see my hands? In women,
Oh, now I can.
In women, your thyroid cartilage is kind of like this, and in men, it's like this.
Oh.
Yeah. And by the way, that's not all women, and that's not all men, and it has nothing to do with masculinity or femininity. But majority of men, for some reason, the way testosterone affects their thyroid cartilage, it makes it literally poke out more, and women have a flatter thyroid cartilage. And some people that are changing their orientation or something will actually get this filed down to make it look a little more feminine because of what we associate with feminine.
Right,
Yeah.
so that's like during puberty the testosterone changes.
It seems to change it in most people, not everybody. It's not like a guarantee. It doesn't give you a measure of testosterone level or anything like that. But that seems to be the general difference, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move right along. By the way, what muscle is this person grabbing right here? Miss Carrillo, please.
The sternocleidomastoid?
Yeah, that's actually one of the best ways to massage it. And believe it or not, he's not pinching from the top first. He or she is rolling their hand underneath it and then holding it down with their thumb. Actually rolling their hand underneath it like making a shelf and then rubbing it. Trying to pinch it from the top is kind of hard. They are pinching it eventually, but it's actually his bottom fingers that are doing the work. They're getting underneath it and then rubbing it on top. Yeah, and sternocleidomastoid is an important muscle to work. We'll get to that. We really, really will. Okay, let's look at the major bones of the skull, at least from the front here, right? Some of these, by the way, have some really obvious names, thank goodness. So, sorry, let's go back. There we go. So, this bone that's right in front here is called the frontal bone. This bone that's right in front here is called the frontal bone. This bone that's kind of here, I'm going to go into more detail, by the way. This bone in front is called the frontal bone. This bone that's right here that kind of looks like a mask on your face is the maxilla. That's just how I remember it. Kind of a mask on your face is the maxilla. We should all know the mandible down here. Your cheekbone is mainly formed with your zygomatic bone. We're going to find out there's a little bit more to it than that. Up here, right at the bridge of your nose, is your nasal bone. You've got two of them, nasal bones, right here. There is a teeny bone back in here called the vomer that you've probably never even seen on even a dead person's skull. And that's because it's tiny. It's held in here by fascia. And when people die and start to rot away, this is the first bone that falls out of their skull. And it's like a tiny little toothpick. And so usually when you see a human skull, you see the vomer missing because it's fallen out. Nor will you really ever touch this bone because it's deep inside the nose here. I'm just making it a point here. You will touch the nasal bone. And if you go deeper into the eye socket, there is the lacrimal, and deeper still is the ethmoid. You'll never get to the ethmoid, nor should you really. We're going to look at the side of the skull in a minute, but I want to point out something really, really unusual. There's a bone called the sphenoid bone that is a single bone, by the way. It's a single bone. It actually starts over here on your temple. It runs behind your eyes. It runs over to this side and goes over all the other way to your other temple. And that's the sphenoid bone. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second to make a couple of points here really quick. We have a temporal bone, But believe it or not, our temporal bone is more like back here, over my ears. Where your temples are is really your sphenoid bone sticking out on these two sides. This is your sphenoid bone right here. Your temporal bone is really here. Sphenoid bone is here running through my skull, right? So put your hand on your forehead and say frontal. Frontal, good. Put your hand here and say mandible. Mandible, good. Put your hand here and say maxilla, sorry. Maxilla. Thank you. Oh, you can't see me?
You're kind of like on the side. Oh, now I can see you. You were like.
Oh, you must have a different screen. I gotcha. Okay. Maxilla, right here, right? Then right here, and you guys can rub this on people, are your two little nasal bones, right? Then if you went down here further, kind of where you tear up, be kind of careful in here. You have two tiny bones too called your lacrimal bones. If you go way in here, which we're not going to do, you've got your ethmoid bones way back in there. Don't go back to the ethmoid. You'll survive, by the way, and you'll still be able to see, but it's just not a good idea. Grab your cheekbones here. These are your zygomatic bones. We're actually later going to find out they form with the temporal bone to give you your zygomatic arch, which is really your cheekbones. But this is your zygomatic. Right where it pokes out here, this is your zygomatic. Thank you, Miss Everson. You strange person. If we were to go in the middle of our nose and get back in here, we'd get to the vomer, sorry. Which you'll never really touch. Although Mr. Craven's trying to right now. Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay. And mandible. Later we're going to learn about the parietals. They're on the side. And you have an occipital bone in back, right? That's why we call this the occipital region. There's an occipital bone in back. It's essentially the whole back of your skull. All right. Let me reshare. We're going to kind of come back and talk about some other stuff here. Okay, so this is a shot from the back, and in the back you can see the occipital bone, and you can see a feature back here you should already be familiar with, the external occipital protuberance, which is a bump you should be able to feel in the back of your head. Yep. Anybody remember? Oh, which is a bump you should be able to feel in the back. Thank you, Miss Creo. Jeez. It's because never mind, I didn't explain. It's because I'm not a good teacher, that's why. This is the occipital bone. This is the external occipital protuberance. It's a bump that we all have in the back. By the way, this is the superior nuchal line running along it. Anyway, anybody remember what ligament attaches to the external occipital protuberance? Miss Abelos.
The ligament de nuce.
Yep, ligamentum nuchae. It goes from here all the way down to the spinous process of C7 and helps keep your head from falling off forward. All of our suboccipitals attach back here. Our trapezius attaches up in here. Our splenius capitis and semispinalis capitis and splenius cervicis all attach up in here. All up in here. So remember today we were talking about high priority targets. I made a big deal because there were 7 muscles that run along your axillary region. Back in this little 2-finger area of my head, all right? Right back here, right around the external occipital protuberance and a little lower, all back through here. You've got 4 occipital muscles on each side, so that's 8 occipital muscles, 8. You've got your trapezius, that's 9. You've got your semispinalis capitis, that's 10. You've got your splenius capitis. You've got your splenius cervicis, that's like 11. All attaching up below this area. Yes, Mr. Craven?
So is that area like, is it at the hairline or is it like more like 2 fingers above it?
Find your external occipital protuberance.
Yeah.
Can you find that bump?
Yeah.
Because the hairline's different already. It is 2 fingers below that bump. And I don't mean dropping 2 fingers. I mean the top finger should touch that bump.
Okay.
And it's the bottom, yes. So it'd be from this thing down to about here in this slide. If you can see my pointer. I think you can. So it's from here's your occipital protuberance. And if you put the top of your finger here, it would go down to here with the other bottom finger. It's a very
so like without looking, like feeling the head for the occipital protuberance, it's kind of like in the midpoint of your ears almost. Like if you were looking at somebody laying down.
Yeah. I like what you said. Yeah. I mean, I want you to feel for the external occipital protuberance, but I like what you said. Yes. If I come over here from my ear with my 2 fingers, it's kind of right there. You're absolutely right. And by the way, on somebody, you will also feel it kind of going under their skull and kind of disappearing because you run into all these muscles that are going there. So this is as the thing kind of curves down too.
I was gonna say, like, because I know some people when you're back there, I know I like this, like getting into the occipitals. Like I love to do that, but a lot of people don't necessarily want you to touch their hair sometimes. So it's really difficult to like get that deep into it. You know?
It is. It's also a highly sensitive area on people because a lot of their pressure is built up here and stuff. So some people love it. Some people absolutely hate it because it's too painful. But if somebody came to me with a headache and they said, you're only allowed to work one place on my body, this is where I'd work. And I would say this is in my top 10 places of stuff I try to hit on every single human being. And you're absolutely right. Some people make it difficult. Some people come to me and say, my back's hurting, but don't touch my lower back. And I'm like, oh, God, here we go. Right? It happens. And then you have to get as creative as possible. Remember, they've told every therapist that, and you're just going to do the best job that somebody could ever have done, even though they're not letting you touch anything. But anyway, I would always hit feet. I'd always hit hips, and I'd always hit this occipital region back here. I mean, always. Feet, hips, occipital region, lower back, always. Then I go to shoulders, believe it or not. Like, I think those other areas are even more important, but shoulders is high up there, don't get me wrong. Cool. All right. So that's the external occipital protuberance. You should be able to find it on everybody. By the way, some people it's really prominent. It's like a big bump back there. And other people it's very mild. And it has nothing to do with anything. It just is what it is. And don't point that out to clients. Oh my God, you've got a huge occipital protuberance. Because stuff that we think is cool, they just think is them, another thing wrong with their body. And then there are sutures. Remember when you were a baby, these were not fully formed, right? These are fairly immovable sutures. They're called synarthrotic. They're without movement. And they're fibrous. They actually do have some flex to them, by the way. And the names of these sutures are not that important. I mean, you will have to answer them on a test today. It's more important to know the bones. But these are fantastic things to rub when you're doing scalp massage. So after you've spent a day and a half on this area, because that's about the minimum you should spend back here, a day and a half rubbing this area, then start heading up kind of with your flat fingers and try to dig into these areas. You'll feel them as like a depression in the scalp because a lot of fascia likes to attach along these sutures. Yep. Cool. All right. Let's go to the side of the scalp. Of the skull. And let's talk about the temporal bone. The temporal bone, I want to make sure you still got my cursor. Okay. The temporal bone is this bone here, the letter C. Yeah? And by the way, notice where your actual temples are is actually the sphenoid bone, which goes through your entire skull. So anyway, the temporal bone is actually back here around your ears. So your temporal bone is not where your temples are. That's my point. The temporal bone is actually one of the key bones in your head. So is the sphenoid, by the way. But the temporal bone has 4 really fascinating features. He said, as though he might ask that on a test later. and probably will definitely ask it at the end of this class. The temporal bone has 4 amazing features. It has your ear hole where you hear through. That's in your temporal bone. It's called your external auditory meatus. The external hole for you to hear through, your external auditory meatus, is one fascinating feature of the temporal bone. There's a big bump down here that at least 4 important muscles attached to, which is the mastoid process. That is the mastoid process of the temporal bone. Yeah? That is the mastoid process. It is that is actually a bump on the temporal bone. This is very hard to see, but there is a tiny toothpick-like process that you will never touch. If you do, you've gone way too deep on this client. It is literally like a toothpick. But it is also off the temporal bone. It's called the styloid process. So far we've got the external auditory meatus, the mastoid process, the styloid process. Yeah? And then last but not least, we have the zygomatic process. So this is the zygomatic bone here, right? But it actually meets the temporal bone right here. And this process coming off the temporal bone is part of what forms, I hate it when I do that, part of what forms your cheekbones. So now the temporal bone has 4 really interesting features that connects it to a lot of other stuff. It has a hole in it called the external auditory meatus. If you're taking notes, it might be something to write down. External auditory meatus, and then 3 processes: mastoid process, styloid process, zygomatic process. External auditory meatus, mastoid process, styloid process, and zygomatic process. There's even more amazing things about this bone, by the way. I mean, it touches up against the sphenoid bone, which hooks to both sides. It touches up against the parietal bones and the occipital bone. It's a really important bone. And, by the oh, I'm so sorry. I can't even believe I did this. I forgot the 5th important thing about this one. I'm so sorry. So sorry. I lied. Please add this to your joints. I mean, to your notes. It also forms the temporal mandibular joint. Your jaw, your mandible, meets the temporal bone right here, right in front of your ear, to form the temporal mandibular joint. Can't believe I forgot that. So there are 5, I lied to you, 5 prominent features to the temporal bone. One is it's got your external auditory meatus, what you're hearing me through right now. External auditory meatus. It forms the temporal mandibular joint. It meets the mandible and forms your jaw joint, which is how I'm talking to you right now. And it has 3 processes: styloid process, zygomatic process, mastoid process. 5 things. 5 amazing things. Yes? Mr. Craven, what are those 5 amazing things to the temporal bone?
Ear hole.
Yes, thank you.
External auditory meatus.
Even better, thank you.
Mastoid process, styloid process, zygomatic process, and the temporal mandibular joint.
Man, thank you so much.
It's like I wrote it down or something. That's crazy.
It's like you're in college and you're a senior.
Yeah.
I know. Somebody's getting ready to graduate. I love it. Thank you. Mr. Snell, what are the 5 features of the temporal bone?
Alright, I don't know if I can say it.
That's okay. We'll do it together.
Okay. I'm just gonna say ear hole, like crazy.
Cool. And so we call that the external
External
auditory
auditory
meatus.
meatus. Okay, that's not bad.
Yeah.
And then the mastoid process, styloid
Process.
zygomatic
process. Good.
process. And then the temporal mandibular
Joint. Yeah.
joint.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Which is just where the temporalis meets the mandible and they have a joint. But yeah, that's fantastic. That's your jaw joint. Fantastic. So, by the way, I'm obviously making such a huge deal out of this bone because from a massage therapist point of view, a lot of stuff's going to be happening here, and there's a lot of pressure on here, and there's lots of stuff that could be happening. And you will see this when we look at TMJ syndrome. But it ties into all sorts of stuff that you've had people mention to you when they have stress. Can be pressure on their temporal bone. Yes. Mr. Richards, what are the 5 features of the temporal bone?
So you've got the external auditorium medius, is that mid?
Yeah, external auditory meatus.
Meatus, right. Mastoid process, styloid process, zygomatic process, and temporomandibular joint.
Yep. I think you said it better than I did. Thank you. Thank you. Sounds like it does sound like my new favorite sandwich. Mr. Godot, sir, what are the 5 features of the temporal bone? Reading all Miss Creel's research. I love it.
Alright. Hello.
Hello, sir. So what are the 5 features of the temporal bone, sir?
I'm sorry, I was in the bathroom. I did not hear this one.
I'll come back to you, sir. Don't you worry.
Okay.
Over and over again. Miss Everson.
Oh.
Miss Everson. Thank you for your positive attitude. What are the 5 features of the temporal bone, madam?
I've got 2. External auditory meatus.
Yes.
Zygomatic process.
Yes.
Push the paper a little bit more to the right. The styloid process.
Yep, little toothpick deep inside here.
Yeah. Temporal, mandibular joint.
Yep. And there's a big bump back here that a whole bunch of stuff attaches to.
The mastoid process.
It is the mastoid process. Yes. Yay. You got claps from Miss Ablos. That's really good. Boom, 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 boom. I love that. Who wants to tell me the 3 or 4 muscles, because we haven't learned one yet, that attach to the mastoid process? Miss Rader, please talk to me.
The sternocleidomastoid, the longissimus, the splenius capitis.
Yep.
And
we haven't done the
it's in my
4th.
head, I think.
We haven't done the 4th one. It's the
Is it like
digastric.
a longus capitis or something?
Well, I was thinking the digastric, and we haven't even done it yet. Don't even worry about it. It's not even. It's a hyoid muscle. We're going to get to them, and it's super deep. She said, by the way, almost in order of what I think was importance, because the sternocleidomastoid can actually argue with the longissimus, right? One's pulling your head back, the other one's pulling your head forward. I wonder if that's important when muscles can argue with each other. Nah, just ignore that, guys. And all the stuff about the rhomboids and the serratus anterior, just forget that. I've only mentioned that. I was off the wrong track. Just forget that. That's not important. Okay, so that is the 5 features of the temporal bone, yeah? Yes. Okay. Miss Lee.
Hi.
Hi. I know this is difficult, Miss Lee, so we're going to do it together. We want to say the 5 features of the temporal bone. Would you like me to say them with you? Would you like some help?
Yeah, I don't
Okay, that's
know
okay.
how to pronounce.
Yeah, that's okay. First, we're going to talk about this one. So, say external
External
auditory
auditory
meatus.
meatus.
That was awesome. External auditory meatus. Now, let's say this jaw joint. Temporal
Temporal
mandibular
mandibular
joint.
joint.
Nice. Now we have 3 processes. We have styloid
Styloid
process,
process.
mastoid
Mastoid
process,
process.
zygomatic
zygomatic
process.
process.
Thank you, Miss Lee.
Thank you.
Thank you. I love that. That was awesome. Mr. Lee.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Lee, let's do the 5 features. You want me to say them with you?
Yes, please.
Okay. External,
External,
auditory,
auditory,
meatus.
meatus,
Yes. Temporal,
temporal,
mandibular,
mandibular,
joint.
joint,
Yes. Now 3 processes. Mastoid process,
mastoid process,
styloid process,
styloid process,
zygomatic process.
zygomatic,
You said it actually, sir. Sorry. Zygomatic
zygomatic
process.
process.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Remember, it's very helpful to touch yourself in massage school. You'd think it'd be helpful to touch other people, but external auditory meatus, temporal mandibular joint, mastoid process, styloid process, zygomatic process. Cheekbones. Cool, cool, cool. I love it. All right. Okay. Let's go back to this slideshow really quick and see if there's anything else to talk to you guys about yet. Before we release some homework, and I'll do some final review just to make sure we're all on the same page. But okay. By the way, so this picture also, let me make sure I'm on this picture. This picture also gives you an idea of the hyoid bone here. Later, we will learn about 8 muscles that attach to the hyoid bone. The hyoid bone is actually very important in allowing you to do really cool stuff with your mouth. And let me tell you the cool stuff you do with your mouth, in case you didn't know. If you think about it, your mouths are kind of amazing because you don't use them just to eat. You use them to eat, talk, and breathe. And that, some of you can do that all at once. And that takes really tricky throat and tongue manipulations. And a lot of that comes from muscles going from the tongue and the jaw and the throat and all this stuff to the hyoid bone. And so later we're going to learn about 8 muscles that actually attach to the hyoid bone. That's kind of cool. Later we're going to learn about 4 muscles that attach to your jaw bone here and make up your jaw, your temporal mandibular joint movement. We've kind of already touched on the temporalis. We're going to learn about the masseter, which kind of goes from your cheekbones here down the side of your jaw here. You can actually see it on some people. They kind of ripples through their cheeks. And we're also going to learn about the pterygoids. You have a medial and lateral pterygoid. They're kind of deep inside here, but they can be massaged, and they are also part of the jaw joint. So we're going to learn about 8 muscles that have to do with the hyoid bone. We're going to learn about 4 that have to do with the jaw. We're going to be reviewing, of course, everything attached to the mastoid process and the occipitals back here. We will learn about some really neat muscles that are found deep, deep inside your throat, behind your trachea, behind your windpipe, that you can't actually be massaged. And eventually we're going to learn about scalenes that are on the side of your neck. And then we will learn about, we won't spend a lot of time on this, but we will go over facial expression muscles, which are all up in here. We obviously care more about the structural muscles of your jaw and neck and all that kind of stuff because those tend to lead to tension. But I still strongly recommend you add facial massage into your massage. Let's see. This is literally looking up as though you were the spinal cord into the bottom of somebody's skull. You see that arrow there to the side? That is telling you that you're looking up as though you're looking up from the bottom. There is a giant hole here in the bottom. What is the word we use for hole in general? Yes, Miss Carrillo.
Foramen.
Foramen, yes. And this is a really large hole because your spinal cord, with every single nerve wire, from your little pinky toe to your little pinky hand, from the tip of your nose, from the tip of your tongue, from your left elbow, and there's millions and millions and millions of them in every square inch of your body, and they send information about heat, pressure, temperature, pain, all sorts of stuff, comes up through this hole and gets wired into your brain. Yep. And this is the foramen magnum. You will never rub this here, but it's just kind of an interesting view. If you can see this bone kind of running through the back here, this is really your sphenoid bone kind of running through the back. It runs from side to side. Your sphenoid bone really runs from side to side. We should have a good picture of it here in just a second. Bear with me. I want a picture of the sphenoid bone. There we go. All right. This is a single bone. Looks like a bat. It's amazing. And it goes from one temple to the other. And your brain literally sits on top of it right here. And it's behind your eyes and everything. It's everywhere. And it's the sphenoid bone, and it kind of locks all the other bones together and is key. And the reason I'm bringing it up is it really shows you how pressure on one side of the head can get pulled to the other side of the head and all that kind of stuff. All these bones are interlocked and such. So that's why I bring it up. And that's the sphenoid bone. We won't get to jaw stuff yet. Yes, what is your question, Miss Carrillo?
So the sphenoid bone, just to clarify, is inside?
Yes,
Okay.
it is inside, yes. So that they kind of made it look like it was in front there too. That's the maxilla in front of it. So that's actually the maxilla. It's running behind the maxilla. This guy is touching it. You can touch it on this side, and it's over on this side. But this stuff in the middle here is actually behind the eyes and behind the maxilla there, right? And it's behind the nasal bones and such. So you're right. The only place you really can touch it is on these temples, on your temples over here. Yeah, very good question. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's stop there because I want to see what we retained. Okay, so Mr. Godot, back to you, sir. What are the 5 features of the temporal bone?
Alright, so this zygomatic process, the petromastoid type. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to make a funny face at you. I just don't know quite what you're saying. So there are 3 processes. You said, what was the first one you said?
Zygomatic.
Good. Zygomatic process. Then there's a process starts with an S, styloid process.
Styloid, yeah.
And then there's the big bump back here. It starts with an M.
You said with the M?
Yeah.
Mastoid
process. So we got zygomatic process, styloid process, mastoid process. And then we've got the ear holes. Do you remember what those are called?
Is it
External.
Auditory. Auditory.
Meatus. It's hard.
Yeah, I don't. External.
Auditory.
Meatus.
And then we've got your jaw joint, which is just named by the temporal joint coming to the mandible. What do we call that?
Say that again? The mandible?
Yeah, your jaw joint is actually called your temporal mandibular joint.
Alright, temporal mandibular joint.
Cool. All right, let's go through them again. So we've got 3 processes. What are they?
The zygomatic
process.
Cool. And then the
mastoid process. Cool. And then a little toothpick one called the styloid process.
Yeah, styloid.
Cool. And then what's your ear hole called?
The auditory.
External auditory. Meatus. And then what's your jaw joint called?
You just said mandibular.
Temporal.
Mandibular
joint.
Joint.
Cool. You might want to write that down because you know me. I'll ask you tomorrow.
No, I'm writing it down for sure.
Cool. Thank
I
you,
saw
sir.
Craven's paper on the screen too, so.
Yeah. Cool. Mr. Overman. Hi, Mr. Overman. What are the 5 features of the temporal mandibular joint? And you're on mute, sir. I sense that you're saying the right answer, so.
I thought you could read it. Sorry.
Yeah.
External auditory meatus, mastoid process, styloid process of the temporal styloid process of the temporal bone, temporomandibular joint. I don't know why that was hard. Temporomandibular joint, and zygomatic arch.
Yeah, zygomatic process. Believe it or not, the zygomatic bone and the zygomatic process from the temporal bone make your zygomatic arch. Kind of cool. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Miss Suriel.
Yes, Mr. Topscott.
Miss Suriel, what are the 5 features of the temporal bone?
Oh my God.
I know.
Is the zygomatic process?
Yes, that was perfect. Zygomatic process.
Styloid process?
Yes. Styloid process, yes.
Mastoid process?
Mastoid process, that's great. You got 3. What are these ear holes called?
External auditory?
Yep, meatus.
Meatus?
Yep. And then what's your jaw joint called?
The jaw joint. That one I don't remember.
It's where your temporal bone and your mandibular bone come together. So we call it your temporal
joint?
Temporal mandibular joint.
Mandibular joint. Okay.
That was good. You just acted like you didn't know anything. You knew it. That was good. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Miss Matas.
I'm here.
Thank you, ma'am.
And I'm listening.
Thank you. Miss Matas, I believe all that. What are the 5 features of the temporal bone?
The 5 features of the temporal bone are the external auditory meatus, temporal mandibular joint.
Those are good. 3 processes.
The styloid process, the mastoid process, and the zygomatic process.
You were listening. Thank you,
Keep
ma'am.
going.
Knock it out of the park. Boom. Nice job. Cool. All right, everybody. Let's release some homework for you guys. Let's see. You have 1 homework assignment. And it's unfortunately 100 questions all on facial bones, like picking them out of a picture. Anyway, I'll let you get started on that.